Sarah Chen adjusted her thick-rimmed glasses for the 100th time that morning as she walked into the military training facility. The other recruits were already gathered around the shooting range, their conversations dying down as she approached. She could feel their eyes on her, taking in her small frame, her oversized uniform that seemed to swallow her whole, and most notably, the heavy prescription glasses that dominated her face. "Look who decided to show up," whispered Marcus, a tall recruit with broad shoulders who had appointed himself the unofficial leader of their group. "How's she supposed to hit anything when she can barely see past those bottle caps on her face?" The laughter that followed was not kind. Sarah had heard worse during her 3 weeks at the facility, but it never got easier. She had grown up in a small town where her father ran a hunting supply store. While other girls her age were playing with dolls, Sarah was learning to clean rifles and understand ballistics. Her father, a former military sniper himself, had taught her everything he knew about precision shooting. But here, surrounded by recruits who looked like they had stepped out of action movies, Sarah felt like an outsider. Her academic background in physics and mathematics meant nothing to them. Her years of practice on her family's private range were invisible. All they saw were the glasses and the quiet girl who preferred books to bars. Sergeant Rodriguez, their instructor, emerged from the equipment shed carrying a clipboard. His weathered face showed no emotion as he surveyed the group. "Today we start long-range precision training," he announced. "This separates the real shooters from the pretenders. You'll be working with targets at distances up to 800 meters. Sarah's heart quickened. This was familiar territory even if the environment was hostile. She had been shooting at similar distances since she was 15, learning to calculate wind speed, humidity, and bullet drop with the precision of a scientist and the instinct of a natural marksman. "Chen," Sergeant Rodriguez called out, consulting his list. "You're up first." The snickers started immediately. "This should be good," someone muttered. "Maybe she can hit the broadside of a barn if we're lucky." Sarah approached the firing line, trying to block out the comments. She picked up the standard-issue rifle, feeling its weight and balance. It was different from her father's custom rifles, but the fundamentals remained the same. She adjusted the scope, taking her time despite the impatient shuffling behind her. Through her glasses and the rifle scope, the distant target came into sharp focus. Sarah controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow as she entered the focused state her father had taught her. The world around her faded away. The mocking voices, the pressure, the doubt. There was only the target, the rifle, and the shot. The crack of the rifle echoed across the range. Through her scope, Sarah watched the bullet strike dead center of the bullseye. The range fell silent for a moment before Sergeant Rodriguez's voice cut through the air. "Perfect center shot. Outstanding work, Chen." The silence stretched uncomfortably as the other recruits processed what they had just witnessed. Sarah stood up from the firing position, her face neutral despite the satisfaction coursing through her. She had proven nothing yet. This was just the beginning. Marcus stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Lucky shot," he declared loudly. "Anyone can get lucky once. Let's see her do it again when it actually matters." Sarah met his gaze steadily. She had dealt with bullies before, though never in an environment where she had to live and train alongside them every day. "It wasn't luck," she said quietly, her voice carrying just enough confidence to make him take a step back. As the other recruits took their turns, Sarah observed their techniques. Most were adequate but unrefined, relying more on natural ability than proper training. A few showed promise, but none demonstrated the systematic approach that her father had drilled into her over years of patient instruction. When the session ended, Sarah cleaned her rifle with methodical precision while the others hurried off to lunch. Sergeant Rodriguez approached her, his expression unreadable. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked. "My father taught me," Sarah replied simply. "He was a sniper in the Marines." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "I thought so. That wasn't beginner's luck out there. You've got real training." "Yes, sir. I've been shooting competitively since I was 16. "Competitively?" Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "What kind of competitions?" "Long-range precision matches mostly. Some tactical scenarios. I hold 3 state records in the junior division. For the first time since Sarah had arrived at the facility, she saw something like respect in an instructor's eyes. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, processing this information. The other recruits don't know about your background, he observed. No, sir. I prefer to let my performance speak for itself. Rodriguez almost smiled at that. Well, Chen, you're going to get plenty of opportunities to let it speak. This was just the warm-up. Next week we start the real challenges. As Sarah walked to the mess hall, she could feel the shift in atmosphere around her. The casual dismissal was being replaced by something more complex. A mixture of surprise, grudging interest, and in some cases, increased hostility from those who didn't like being shown up. She found an empty table and ate her meal in silence, reviewing the day's performance in her mind. The 800-meter shot had been routine by her standards, but she understood that it had served as an important announcement. She was not the weak link that everyone had assumed her to be. The real tests were still ahead, and Sarah knew that her fellow recruits would be watching her more carefully now. Some might even try to sabotage her chances, viewing her success as a threat to their own advancement. But she had faced adversity before, and she had her father's training to guide her. That evening, as she cleaned her glasses and prepared for sleep, Sarah reflected on the long journey that had brought her here. She thought about her father's words before she left home. Prove them wrong with your actions, not your words. Let your shots do the talking. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she would be ready for them. The next few weeks brought a series of increasingly difficult challenges, and with each one, Sarah's reputation began to shift. What had started as mockery was slowly transforming into something more complex, a mixture of grudging respect from some and intensified resentment from others who couldn't accept that the quiet girl with glasses was outperforming them consistently. The weather conditions became more challenging as autumn set in. Rain, wind, and cold temperatures tested every recruit's ability to maintain accuracy under stress. While others struggled with the elements, Sarah seemed to thrive. Her father had trained her in all conditions, teaching her to read wind patterns by watching grass movements and to account for temperature changes in her calculations. During a particularly difficult exercise in driving rain, Sarah achieved 5 consecutive hits on targets at 1,000 meters, while most recruits couldn't maintain accuracy beyond 600 meters. Sergeant Rodriguez began assigning her to mentor struggling shooters, a role that created new tensions within the group. I don't need help from Four Eyes, snapped Jennifer Walsh, a recruit from Texas who prided herself on her shooting abilities, especially not from someone who probably learned everything from books instead of real experience. Sarah remained patient, understanding that acceptance would come slowly, if at all. She focused on sharing practical techniques rather than theory, demonstrating how to properly read environmental conditions and adjust accordingly. Some recruits genuinely appreciated the help, while others remained resistant to learning from someone they had initially dismissed. Marcus had become particularly hostile as Sarah's abilities became more apparent. He began spreading rumors about her background, suggesting that she had received special training or equipment that gave her an unfair advantage. The accusations were baseless, but they found fertile ground among recruits looking for explanations that preserved their own egos. The situation came to a head during a team exercise where recruits were paired for a complex shooting scenario. Marcus deliberately chose Sarah as his partner, seeing an opportunity to expose what he believed were her limitations under pressure. "Let's see how well you do when lives depend on it," he said as they prepared for the exercise. "This isn't some controlled range shooting anymore. The scenario involved moving targets, time pressure, and simulated combat stress. Sarah and Marcus had to work together to engage multiple targets at varying distances while under artificial pressure from instructors shouting commands and creating distractions. Sarah adapted quickly to the chaotic environment, her breathing remaining controlled while Marcus became increasingly agitated. When their turn came, she methodically engaged each target with calm precision while Marcus struggled to maintain composure. Their team achieved the highest score of the day, with Sarah accounting for 8 of their 10 successful hits. The performance was impossible to dismiss or explain away. Even Marcus couldn't deny what everyone had witnessed. As they walked back from the exercise, he was uncharacteristically quiet, the reality of Sarah's superior skills finally sinking in. Sergeant Rodriguez pulled Sarah aside after the exercise. "I've been watching your progress," he said. "You're not just good, you're exceptional. Have you given any thought to specialized training?" Sarah had indeed been thinking about her future. The standard military path seemed too limiting for her abilities, but she wasn't sure what alternatives existed. "What kind of specialized training, sir?" "Elite sniper school. It's extremely selective and the training is brutal, but someone with your natural ability and work ethic could succeed. The selection process starts next month." The possibility both excited and intimidated Sarah. Elite sniper training represented the highest level of precision shooting in the military, but it also meant facing even greater skepticism and challenges. She would be competing against candidates who had been pre-selected for their potential, not someone who had stumbled into excellence despite initial appearances. "Think about it," Rodriguez continued, "but don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't come around often." That evening, Sarah called her father from the base phone. She described her progress and the opportunity that had been presented to her. Her father listened quietly, asking occasional questions about the specific challenges she had faced. "You've always been able to outshoot people who underestimated you," he said finally. "But this would be different. These candidates will be the best of the best and they won't underestimate anyone. Are you ready for that level of competition?" Sarah considered the question seriously. Part of her success had come from being underestimated, allowing her to exceed low expectations. Competing against elite candidates would require her to prove herself based purely on ability, without the advantage of surprise. "I think I am," she said. "The fundamentals you taught me are solid. I know I can compete at that level." "Then you should do it," her father replied. "But remember, being the best isn't just about having perfect technique. It's about performing when everything is on the line, when failure isn't an option. That's what separates good shooters from great ones." After the call, Sarah walked around the base thinking about her decision. The other recruits were in the recreation hall, their laughter and conversation drifting through the windows. She felt separate from them, not just because of their initial treatment of her, but because her goals had evolved beyond what they were pursuing. The next morning, Sarah approached Sergeant Rodriguez's office and knocked on the door. When he invited her in, she stood at attention and delivered her decision with quiet confidence. "I'd like to apply for the elite sniper program, sir." Rodriguez smiled for the first time since she had known him. "I was hoping you'd say that. The application process is extensive, and the physical and psychological evaluations are designed to eliminate candidates who aren't completely committed. Are you sure you're ready?" "Yes, sir. I'm ready." As word spread through the base about Sarah's application to elite training, the reactions were mixed. Some recruits expressed genuine support, recognizing her abilities and wishing her success. Others remained skeptical, predicting that she would wash out when faced with truly elite competition. Marcus approached her during dinner, his expression serious. "Look, I know we haven't gotten along," he said awkwardly, "but I want you to know, what you've accomplished here is impressive. I was wrong about you." The admission surprised Sarah. She had expected Marcus to remain hostile until the end of their training. "Thank you," she said simply. "That means something. I still think elite sniper training might be too much," he continued. "But then again, I thought regular training would be too much for you and I was completely wrong about that." Sarah appreciated his honesty, even if his confidence in her abilities remained limited. She understood that changing deeply held assumptions took time, and Marcus had made more progress than most in acknowledging her capabilities. The weeks leading up to the selection process passed quickly. Sarah maintained her training routine while preparing for the additional challenges that elite selection would bring. She studied advanced ballistics, practiced under increasingly difficult conditions, and worked to strengthen areas where she knew she would be tested. Her performance during these final weeks at the basic facility was flawless. She had achieved something that seemed impossible when she first arrived: complete respect for her abilities, even from those who had initially mocked her. But Sarah knew that this was just the foundation for the greater challenges ahead. The elite sniper selection course was held at a remote facility in the mountains, where 18 candidates had been assembled from military units across the country. Sarah arrived to find herself facing competition unlike anything she had encountered before. These were not basic recruits but experienced soldiers who had already proven themselves in their respective units. The other candidates were exactly what she had expected: tall, muscular men who looked like they had stepped out of military recruitment posters. Their confidence was evident in how they carried themselves, in their easy camaraderie, and in the casual way they discussed their previous achievements. Sarah listened as they traded stories of combat experience, special operations training, and championship-level competitive shooting. 17 men and 1 woman, observed Captain Hayes, the selection course commander, as he addressed the group on their first morning. Some of you might think that means the standards have been lowered to accommodate diversity. You would be wrong. The standards here are absolute. They don't change based on who you are or where you came from. You either meet them or you go home. His eyes lingered on Sarah as he spoke, not with hostility but with the careful attention of someone evaluating an unknown quantity. Over the next 6 weeks, we will test every aspect of your abilities: physical conditioning, marksmanship, fieldcraft, psychological stability, and decision-making under extreme stress. Most of you will not finish this course. The first week focused on establishing baselines. Physical fitness tests pushed every candidate to their limits. Sarah's smaller frame meant she struggled with some aspects, carrying heavy equipment over long distances, completing obstacle courses designed for larger bodies. But her endurance and determination kept her competitive, and her superior marksmanship scores balanced out areas where she fell behind. The shooting evaluations began at 1,200 meters, a distance that separated competent marksmen from true precision shooters. Sarah performed flawlessly, but so did several other candidates. The difference was in the subtle details. Her technique was cleaner, her preparation more methodical, her results more consistent. David Morrison, a candidate from an elite Army unit, approached her after the first shooting evaluation. Unlike the recruits at basic training, his interest seemed genuine rather than mocking. "Your form is textbook perfect," he said. "Who trained you?" "My father," Sarah replied, appreciating that he had focused on technique rather than expressing surprise at her performance. "Military?" "Marine sniper. Vietnam era," Morrison nodded approvingly. "It shows. You've got the old-school fundamentals down solid. That's going to serve you well here." As the days progressed, the psychological pressure intensified. Candidates were subjected to sleep deprivation, stress positions, and scenarios designed to test their decision-making under extreme duress. Sarah's academic background helped her maintain analytical thinking when others became reactive. But the physical demands were taking their toll. By the end of the second week, 3 candidates had voluntarily withdrawn, and 2 had been eliminated for failing to meet minimum standards. Sarah remained, but she could feel the instructors watching her more closely, waiting to see if she would reach her breaking point. The turning point came during a complex stalking exercise. Candidates had to approach within 200 meters of an observation post without being detected, then make a precision shot on a target at 1,500 meters. The exercise tested fieldcraft, patience, and shooting ability simultaneously. Sarah spent hours planning her approach, studying terrain maps and weather patterns. While other candidates relied on speed and physical capability, she used intelligence and precision. Her route was longer but offered better concealment. Her movement was slower but more careful. When she finally reached her firing position, Sarah had to wait another 2 hours for optimal wind conditions. Other candidates had already taken their shots with mixed results. The pressure to perform was enormous. Any mistake would likely end her chances in the program. Through her scope, the target seemed impossibly small at 1,500 meters. Environmental factors were challenging. Shifting winds, changing light conditions, and the stress of knowing that instructors were watching every movement. Sarah went through her mental checklist methodically, calculating adjustments for wind, humidity, and bullet drop. The shot felt perfect the moment she pulled the trigger. Through her scope, she watched the bullet strike dead center of the target. The radio crackled with confirmation from the observation post. "Perfect center hit." Captain Hayes' voice came through clearly. "Outstanding shot." Chen returned to base. The success of the stalking exercise marked a shift in how the other candidates viewed Sarah. The element of surprise was gone. Everyone now understood that she belonged in the program based purely on merit. The casual dismissiveness that had characterized some initial interactions was replaced by professional respect. "That was an incredible shot," said Lieutenant Colonel Peters, another candidate with extensive special operations experience. I've seen maybe a dozen people make that kind of shot under those conditions. You made it look routine. Sarah appreciated the recognition, but she also understood that greater expectations would follow. Success at 1,500 meters meant that instructors would push her to even greater distances, more challenging conditions. The pressure would only increase from this point forward. The third week introduced advanced ballistics calculations and shooting at extreme distances. Targets were placed at 2,000 meters and beyond, requiring not just technical skill, but also deep understanding of environmental factors and bullet behavior over long distances. This was territory where Sarah's academic background in physics became a significant advantage. While other candidates relied on pre-calculated tables and approximations, Sarah could perform precise calculations for any given set of conditions. Her understanding of atmospheric pressure, humidity effects, and ballistic coefficients allowed her to make adjustments that others couldn't match. During one particularly challenging session, candidates were required to engage targets at 2,200 meters in shifting wind conditions. The exercise was designed to push everyone to their limits, with most candidates expected to struggle with consistency at such distances. Sarah's first shot was a near miss, close enough to demonstrate competence, but not the precision she demanded of herself. She took a moment to reassess conditions, recalculating her adjustments based on observed bullet trace. Her second shot was dead center. "How did you make that adjustment so quickly?" asked Morrison, who had struggled with the distance despite his experience. Sarah explained her calculation method, sharing the mathematical approach her father had taught her for extreme distance shooting. Morrison listened intently, recognizing the value of her systematic approach. "Most of us just use experience and intuition," he admitted. "Your method is much more precise." As word spread about Sarah's analytical approach, other candidates began seeking her advice on extreme distance calculations. The dynamic was different from basic training. These were elite soldiers who understood that learning from the best, regardless of source, could mean the difference between success and failure. The instructors noticed this shift as well. Captain Hayes pulled Sarah aside after a particularly successful day of long-range shooting. "You're not just performing well," he observed. "You're raising the performance level of the entire group. That's leadership." Sarah hadn't thought of her contributions in terms of leadership, but she understood the point. In elite units, individual excellence was important, but the ability to make others better was equally valuable. "The real test is still ahead," Hayes continued. "We're moving to 3,000-meter shots next week. That's where we separate the exceptional from the truly elite. Very few candidates in the history of this program have demonstrated consistent accuracy at that distance." The challenge was both thrilling and intimidating. 3,000 meters represented the absolute edge of what was possible with current technology and perfect conditions. Success would require not just technical skill but also mental fortitude under extreme pressure. Sarah spent the evening reviewing ballistics tables and weather data, preparing for challenges that would test every aspect of her training. She was no longer the underestimated recruit with thick glasses. She was a serious candidate for elite selection, and everyone knew it. The fourth week of selection brought challenges that pushed every remaining candidate to their absolute limits. Of the original 18 candidates, only 12 remained, and the pressure was becoming more intense with each passing day. Sarah had proven herself capable at ranges up to 2,200 meters, but the instructors were preparing to test abilities that few people in the world possessed. Captain Hayes gathered the remaining candidates for a briefing on extreme long-range engagement protocols. The training facility had targets positioned at distances up to 3,500 meters, ranges where success required perfect technique, ideal conditions, and exceptional mental control. At these distances, Hayes explained, you're operating at the very edge of what's physically possible. A slight miscalculation, a moment of poor trigger control, or a small change in environmental conditions can mean the difference between a perfect shot and a complete miss. This is where we identify candidates who have the potential for the most challenging. Assignments are military phases. Sarah studied the range, cards, and environmental data with her characteristic methodical approach. The mathematics became more complex at extreme distances, with factors like Coriolis effect and bullet stability playing significant roles. Her physics background gave her advantages in understanding these principles, but translating theoretical knowledge into practical application under pressure would be the real test. The first extreme distance exercise was conducted at 3,000 meters. Each candidate would have 3 attempts to hit a target roughly the size of a dinner plate. The conditions were as favorable as possible: minimal wind, good visibility, stable atmospheric pressure, but the distance alone made success extremely difficult. Sarah watched as the first candidates took their shots. Morrison, despite his experience and skill, managed only 1 hit out of 3 attempts. Another candidate, Williams from a Special Forces unit, achieved 2 hits but struggled with consistency. The pattern was clear. Even elite marksmen found extreme distances challenging. When Sarah's turn came, she took extra time with her preparation. She verified her scope settings multiple times, calculated atmospheric effects with greater precision than usual, and spent several minutes observing wind patterns at different points along the bullet's trajectory. The other candidates watched intently, understanding that her analytical approach might provide insights they could use. Her first shot was a hit, striking near the center of the target. The second shot was even better, a perfect center hit that drew appreciative comments from observers. Sarah took her time with the third shot, wanting to demonstrate consistency rather than just occasional success. The third bullet joined the others in the target's center. 3 for 3 at 3,000 meters, announced the range officer. Outstanding performance. The accomplishment marked another milestone in Sarah's journey from mocked recruit to elite candidate. But she also understood that the instructors were building toward something even more challenging. The satisfied expressions on their faces suggested that her performance was confirming their expectations rather than surprising them. After the exercise, Colonel Davis, the senior instructor, approached Sarah privately. "We need to discuss your capabilities and potential assignments," he said. "Your consistent performance at extreme distances puts you in a very select category." They walked to his office, where Davis showed Sarah classified briefings about missions that required extreme distance precision. The scenarios were sobering: high-value targets in heavily defended areas, situations where a single shot from maximum distance was the only viable option. "This kind of work requires more than just shooting ability," Davis explained. "You need absolute mental discipline, the ability to remain calm under extreme pressure, and the judgment to make split-second decisions that can have strategic implications." "Are you prepared for that level of responsibility?" Sarah considered the question seriously. The training had been challenging, but the real-world applications were far more complex. Success would mean preventing potential threats to national security, but failure could have catastrophic consequences. "I believe I am," she said finally. "My father taught me that precision shooting is ultimately about protecting people. The distance doesn't change that responsibility." Davis nodded approvingly. "That's the right mindset. Tomorrow we're going to test you at the absolute limits of current capability. 4,000 meters. Only a handful of people have ever made shots at that distance under field conditions." The prospect was both thrilling and intimidating. 4,000 meters represented the theoretical maximum effective range for the equipment they were using. Success would require perfect conditions, flawless technique, and exceptional mental control. That evening, Sarah called her father to discuss the upcoming challenge. She described her progress in the extreme distance test that lay ahead. Her father listened quietly, asking detailed questions about equipment specifications and environmental factors. 4,000 meters is serious business, he said finally. At that distance, you're dealing with variables that most people never encounter. The bullet will be in flight for over 4 seconds. A lot can change in 4 seconds. I've been working through the calculations, Sarah replied. The mathematics are complex but manageable. The real challenge will be mental, maintaining focus and confidence when everything has to be perfect. You've always had the mental discipline for this kind of work, her father said. Trust your training, trust your preparation, and trust yourself. If the conditions are right, you can make that shot. The next morning brought ideal weather conditions: minimal wind, excellent visibility, stable atmospheric pressure. The instructors had clearly been waiting for optimal conditions to conduct the 4,000-meter test. Sarah and 2 other top candidates would each have 1 attempt at the maximum distance. The target was barely visible through the spotting scope, a small square that represented the ultimate test of precision shooting capability. Sarah spent an hour calculating atmospheric effects, studying wind patterns, and verifying her equipment settings. The preparation was meticulous, understanding that she would have only one opportunity. Morrison went first, his shot missing low despite careful preparation. Williams followed, achieving a close miss that demonstrated excellent technique but fell short of the precision required. Then it was Sarah's turn. She settled into her firing position with practiced calm, going through her mental checklist methodically. Through her scope, the target was barely distinguishable from the surrounding terrain. Sarah controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow as she entered the focused state that had served her throughout the selection process. The shot felt different from anything she had experienced before. The rifle's recoil seemed sharper, the sound of the bullet's departure more crisp. Through her scope, Sarah watched the bullet's trace as it arced toward the distant target. 4.5 seconds later, the spotter's voice crackled through the radio. Hit. Dead center. The range fell silent for a moment as the significance of the shot registered. Captain Hayes lowered his binoculars and turned to face Sarah with an expression of genuine amazement. In 20 years of running this program, he said, I've seen exactly 3 people make shots at 4,000 meters. You just joined a very exclusive club. The other candidates gathered around Sarah, their congratulations genuine and enthusiastic. The competition aspect had given way to shared appreciation for witnessing something exceptional. Morrison shook her hand with obvious respect. That was probably the best shot I've ever seen, he said. The precision required at that distance is incredible. As news of the 4,000-meter shot spread through the facility, Sarah found herself the center of attention, in a way that felt completely different from her early days of training. The respect was earned through demonstrated excellence, not demanded through intimidation or granted through sympathy. Colonel Davis pulled her aside that afternoon. Congratulations on completing the selection process, he said. You've demonstrated capabilities that open doors to assignments that few people ever see. Are you ready to discuss your future? Sarah understood that she had reached a turning point in her military career. The journey from mocked recruit to elite sniper was complete, but an even more challenging path lay ahead. The missions Davis would describe would test not just her shooting ability, but her courage, judgment, and commitment to serving her country at the highest level. 6 months after completing elite sniper selection, Sarah found herself deployed to a classified location where her exceptional long-range capabilities would be put to the ultimate test. The mission briefing was unlike anything she had encountered during training. Real targets, real consequences, and distances that pushed beyond even the 4,000-meter shot that had established her. Reputation intelligence had identified a high-value target in a mountainous region where traditional approaches were impossible. The target's location was heavily defended, with multiple security layers that made close-range engagement extremely dangerous. Sarah's mission was to neutralize the threat from a position over 3,800 meters away, a distance that would allow her team to remain undetected while eliminating a significant threat to regional stability. The mission planning took weeks. Sarah worked with meteorologists to identify optimal weather windows, studied satellite imagery to understand terrain features, and coordinated with intelligence analysts to confirm target movement patterns. Every variable had to be perfect: wind conditions, atmospheric pressure, temperature, and timing all needed to align for success. This is as close to impossible as it gets, admitted Major Thompson, the mission commander. The distance alone would make this shot extremely difficult under ideal conditions. Add in the mountain environment, unpredictable weather, and the pressure of a real-world target, and you're looking at something that's never been accomplished in operational conditions. Sarah understood the magnitude of the challenge. During training exercises, she had the luxury of multiple attempts in controlled conditions. This mission would allow for only one shot, with no opportunity for adjustment or correction. Success would require flawless execution of everything she had learned. The insertion took place under cover of darkness, with Sarah's team establishing a concealed position on a rocky outcrop that provided a clear line of sight to the target area. The hide was expertly camouflaged, invisible from aerial observation, and positioned to take advantage of optimal shooting angles. Sarah spent the first day studying environmental conditions through her scope and spotting equipment. Wind patterns in the mountainous terrain were complex, with different air currents at various altitudes creating challenges that required constant monitoring. Temperature variations throughout the day affected atmospheric density, requiring continuous recalculation of ballistic solutions. Her spotter, Sergeant Martinez, was an experienced operator who had worked with several elite snipers. His initial skepticism about working with someone so new to operational deployments had been replaced by professional respect as he observed Sarah's methodical preparation and technical expertise. "I've never seen anyone take this much care with environmental analysis," he admitted, as Sarah recorded her 4th hour of wind measurements. "Most snipers rely more on instinct and experience." "At this distance, instinct isn't enough," Sarah replied, continuing to document atmospheric conditions. "The margin for error is so small that everything has to be calculated precisely." The target appeared according to intelligence predictions on the 2nd day, but conditions were not optimal for engagement. Wind speeds were too variable, and atmospheric disturbances from thermal heating made accurate ranging impossible. Sarah made the difficult decision to wait, despite pressure from mission commanders who were concerned about losing the opportunity. "The shot parameters are outside acceptable limits," she reported via encrypted radio. "Probability of success is less than 40% under current conditions." The decision to wait demonstrated the kind of judgment that separated elite snipers from merely excellent marksmen. Sarah understood that patience was often more important than courage in achieving mission success. Her training had emphasized the importance of taking shots only when conditions supported the highest probability of success. Weather forecasting predicted optimal conditions for the following morning. With minimal wind and stable atmospheric pressure, Sarah spent the evening reviewing her calculations and mentally rehearsing the shot sequence. She had done everything possible to prepare. Now success would depend on executing flawlessly when the moment came. The target appeared at 8:47 hours, moving according to the predicted pattern established by weeks of surveillance. Sarah had been in position for 3 hours, monitoring conditions and making final adjustments to her equipment. Through her scope, the target was barely visible at 3847 meters, a distance that represented the absolute edge of technical possibility. Martinez provided wind readings and confirmed range measurements, while Sarah made final ballistic calculations. The mathematics were complex, accounting for bullet drop, wind drift, atmospheric density, and the Coriolis effect at extreme distance. Every variable had been measured and calculated with scientific precision. "Conditions are optimal," Martinez reported quietly. "Wind is steady at 4 miles per hour from the northwest. Atmospheric pressure is stable. Range confirmed at 3847 meters." Sarah controlled her breathing and settled into the perfect shooting position that had become second nature through thousands of hours of practice. Through her scope, she could see the target clearly, moving slowly across the designated engagement zone. The shot would need to be timed perfectly to intercept the target's movement. The mental calculations were instantaneous: lead time for target movement, bullet flight time of 4.7 seconds, wind drift compensation, and elevation adjustment for the extreme distance. Sarah's training had made these calculations automatic, allowing her to focus on the precision elements that would determine success or failure. The trigger press was smooth and controlled, exactly as her father had taught her years earlier on their family range. The recoil felt familiar despite the distance and pressure, a reminder that fundamental techniques remained constant regardless of circumstances. Through her scope, Sarah tracked the bullet's path as it arced toward the target, across nearly 4 kilometers of mountain terrain. The flight time seemed endless, with atmospheric disturbances creating visible trace effects as the bullet maintained its trajectory. At 4.7 seconds after firing, the target dropped immediately and completely. Martinez confirmed the hit through his spotting scope, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they had just accomplished. "Target down. Clean hit. Mission successful." The radio crackled with confirmation from Overwatch positions and command elements. Intelligence analysts would later confirm that the mission had achieved its strategic objectives, eliminating a significant threat while avoiding the casualties that would have resulted from conventional approaches. Sarah remained in position for several minutes, processing the significance of what had just occurred. The shot had been technically perfect, but the implications went far beyond marksmanship. The successful engagement had demonstrated capabilities that opened new possibilities for future operations while establishing her as one of the world's most capable precision shooters. The extraction was conducted with the same care as the insertion, with Sarah's team withdrawing undetected from their position. As they moved toward the extraction point, Martinez walked beside Sarah with obvious respect for what he had witnessed. In 15 years of operations, I've never seen anything like that shot, he said quietly. The distance, the conditions, the pressure, everything was perfect. You made the impossible look routine. Sarah appreciated the recognition, but her thoughts were already moving beyond the immediate success. The mission had proven that her capabilities could be applied to situations that were previously considered impossible, opening doors to assignments that would test not just her shooting ability, but her judgment and leadership under extreme pressure. The debriefing sessions that followed would analyze every aspect of the mission, creating protocols and procedures that could be applied to similar situations in the future. Sarah's methodical approach and scientific precision had established new standards for extreme distance engagements, changing how military planners approached certain types of high-value targets. The news of Sarah's successful 38-47-meter shot spread through military circles with the speed and impact of the bullet itself. What had once seemed impossible became a documented reality, recorded in classified reports and studied by strategists who suddenly had new options for addressing threats that were previously considered unreachable. Within weeks of returning from the mission, Sarah found herself at the center of a transformation in how elite units approached extreme distance engagements. Her methodical scientific approach was being incorporated into training programs, and she was asked to develop protocols that could be taught to other elite snipers. The irony was not lost on her. The same analytical methods that had once made her seem like an outsider, the careful calculations, the systematic preparation, the preference for precision over instinct were now being recognized as revolutionary approaches to an ancient military discipline. Colonel Davis summoned Sarah to his office for a conversation that would shape the next phase of her career. The walls were lined with commendations and photographs from decades of special operations, but his attention was focused entirely on the quiet young woman who had redefined what was possible in precision shooting. The successful mission has created opportunities that didn't exist before, he began. Command wants to establish a specialized unit focused on extreme distance capabilities. They want you to lead the development of this program. The offer was both an honor and a challenge that Sarah had never anticipated. Leadership had not been part of her original goals. She had simply wanted to prove herself as a capable sniper. But the success of her methodical approach had demonstrated that individual excellence could be systematized and taught to others. What would this program involve? She asked, understanding that the decision would determine not just her own future but potentially influence how the military approached precision shooting for years to come. Training other elite snipers in your methods, developing equipment and procedures for extreme distance engagements, and leading missions that require capabilities beyond current operational standards, Davis explained. Essentially, you would be creating a new specialty within special operations. Sarah considered the implications carefully. The program would allow her to share the knowledge that her father had given her, multiplying its impact beyond what any individual sniper could achieve. But it would also mean accepting responsibility for training others to take the kinds of risks that she had just successfully navigated. I'd want to ensure that anyone in this program has the fundamental skills and mental discipline necessary, she said. The margin for error at these distances is too small to accept anything less than perfection in preparation. Davis smiled at her response. That's exactly the kind of thinking that makes you the right person for this role. Command has already approved the program structure. You'll have access to the best equipment, unlimited training resources, and the authority to set selection standards. The next 6 months were devoted to developing what would become known as the Ultra-Long-Range Precision Program. Sarah worked with engineers to optimize equipment for extreme distances, collaborated with meteorologists to understand atmospheric effects, and designed selection criteria that would identify candidates with the potential for exceptional performance. The first group of candidates included Morrison and Williams from her original selection course, along with several other elite snipers who had been identified through their units. Sarah approached the instruction with the same methodical precision that had characterized her own development, emphasizing the scientific principles that made extreme distance shooting possible. Precision shooting at these distances is applied physics, she explained to the first class of students. Understanding the principles allows you to make accurate calculations under any conditions. Relying solely on experience and instinct limits you to situations similar to what you've encountered before. The training program combined traditional marksmanship instruction with advanced mathematics, meteorology, and ballistics theory. Students learned to calculate atmospheric effects, measure environmental variables with scientific precision, and maintain mental discipline under extreme pressure. Sarah's teaching style reflected her own learning experience. She was patient with students who struggled with the mathematical concepts, but demanding when it came to precision and attention to detail. The program had a high failure rate, but those who completed it demonstrated capabilities that had previously been considered impossible. Morrison, now one of Sarah's assistant instructors, often reflected on the transformation he had witnessed. "I remember when she first showed up at selection," he told new students. "Some of us thought she didn't belong there. Now she's teaching us things that are changing how we approach our profession." The program's reputation grew as its graduates achieved success on increasingly challenging missions. Sarah's systematic approach was proving effective across different environments and conditions, validating her belief that scientific principles were more reliable than intuition for extreme distance work. 3 years after the program's establishment, Sarah received a visit from her father, who had come to observe a training exercise. Watching her work with students, he saw the culmination of lessons that had begun years earlier on their family range. "You've taken what I taught you and made it into something I never imagined," he said after observing a day of instruction. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished, but more importantly, I'm proud of how you've used your abilities to make others better." Sarah appreciated his recognition, understanding that her journey had come full circle. She had started as his student, become an elite performer in her own right, and now was passing those lessons on to the next generation of precision shooters. The mocking and skepticism that had characterized her early military experience seemed like distant memories. The thick glasses that had once been a source of ridicule were now recognized as tools that had helped her see further and more clearly than anyone had thought possible. During graduation ceremonies for each new class, Sarah often thought about the young recruits who were just beginning their own journeys. Some would face the same skepticism she had encountered, judged by their appearance rather than their potential. Her program had become a place where capability mattered more than first impressions, where systematic preparation could overcome natural disadvantages. The shot at 38.47 meters had ended more than just a mission. It had ended the jokes, the doubts, and the assumptions about who could succeed in the most demanding aspects of military service. Sarah had proven that excellence could come from unexpected sources, that scientific approach could enhance rather than replace warrior instincts, and that the quiet student with thick glasses could become the teacher that others sought to emulate. As she watched her students practice on the same ranges where she had once struggled to gain acceptance, Sarah understood that her greatest achievement was not the record-breaking shot or the successful missions, but the knowledge that she had opened doors for others who might not fit traditional expectations of what a warrior should look like. The girl who had been mocked for her glasses had become the standard by which others measured themselves, proving that true precision, in shooting as in life, came not from fitting expectations but from exceeding them through dedication, preparation, and the courage to prove doubters wrong, one perfect shot at a time.